morning, I have a feeling race 2 could be even stronger.
It certainly will. It certainly will, Jake. Sorry there, I've got to remember to take the mask
It's
off.
the
to
dreaded
make it clear,
mask.
isn't it?
Always.
So the good news is that Julien Monet is on track. He is at the back of the grid in his 32. Kozek in his 777 has a new nose cone. He has now a white nose cone on the front of his all black and red striped car. And the good news is that he's back. Johnny Kazum is also on the grid because we didn't see any gaps anywhere. And looking through this shot here, we can see there's Johnny Kazum mid-pack, weaving from left to right. So the good news is that he is here as well. We have Amir Faislin as well, who had engine problems in qualifying. We did see him out through the first race of the day, but he was at the back of the field, so he's one to watch out for here as well. So this will be another rolling start here for the Golf Radical Cup. As we said, George King is there. There he is in shot right now, the number 14. Great to see him back out. Of course, drama in the end of qualifying, actually, earlier this morning with engine problems to his number 14. He's certainly the quickest driver and the man to beat throughout the championship so far. And actually, looking at this, are we going to have a double file rolling start here? It doesn't look like it. I think we might go for a Stanley start, presumably, Jake. But let's see if we can see the safety car in front of the field. There is the 777 now with a new nose cone on the front of the car. And, well, that was due to an incident down towards turn 1 where unfortunately, Koziak basically did a 360, unfortunately stopped in place at the exit of turn 1. And it looks like we will be doing a rolling start here, Jake.
Indeed we will. So it'll be rolling start format once again. Bukansov and championship leader George King, who the only race he hasn't won really all season was the first race this morning when he couldn't start the car due to engine problems suffered in qualifying. The safety car peels off. It'll be Loggie and Sweetenham on the second row. Bamberg and Madsa in behind. Then Fizulin, Kazum, Alamidi, Morad, Al-Kazemi, Roberts, Wang, Chosek and Muni. So it will be a 15-strong field going into the second race of the weekend. The endurance race, of course, is tomorrow. So this is going to be a big dash. 25 minutes on the clock, please. And let's go racing for 25 minutes of the Dubai Autodrome Circuit. Golf Radical Cup style. It was amazing this morning. This afternoon, it'll be even better. Ready? Wait for it. Let's race at Dubai Autodrome. And it's a cracking start from the front of the field. George King just about managing to maintain the gaggle on the far side. But what a sweep from the cars as they head down towards turn 1. Somebody's going to have to give best in the first corner. Johnny Kazum trying to get a clean line around the outside alongside Sweetenham. They bang wheels and rub paint. And George King is going to take the lead as Loggie sweeps in on the inside line and gets in a second. What a move from Loggie. He dives on the inside of Bukatsov. There's still cars trying to avoid each other. They are dancing with death on the inside of the apexes before the car washes out. And what great car control from everybody. They all got through, gaggled together, no incidents, no drama, no worries.
A great start there from Ian Loggie. Was all the way up against the pit wall almost and managed to get 2 for 1 down towards the first corner. I did notice on the live chat that Usman Magal was saying hello. Of course, Usman is the co-driver with the number 23 Murad, who is currently circulating in 9th position. Usman, we hope to see you tomorrow in our endurance race. I know we're used to seeing you usually running the sprint races solo, but then you race with Murad during the endurance races. It looks like this weekend they may have done it the other way around, so it'd be great to see Usman back behind the wheel because he's a very rapid driver indeed, and his car looks absolutely phenomenal as it does every weekend. We've got more squabbling throughout the field here. We haven't even got one lap in it. We've not settled anything at all. There are drivers looking each and every way. Unfortunately, the 777's lost out. Ian Loggie runs a little bit wide there through. He's trying to catch us out. Almidi does as well. A lot of drivers there on the runoff area through turn 12, Jake. And looks like the action is heating up here in the second race of the Golf Radical Cup.
Yeah, that was Sweetenham going wide. He manages to get himself back on the road and then drift straight off it again as he battles away. That's Ian Roberts making good progress through the field as he tries to pick off a couple of cars. Car 15, that is Amir Feyzulin. His race start is under investigation. So I wonder if he jumped the start. And that could have caused why we had such a big squabble on the way down to the first corner because it was mighty close. So a fascinating battle. Oh, goodness me. Jacopo Mazza got very tight on the inside line there as he battled with his colleague, and they very nearly took each other off. So George King leads the way. Ian Loggie, second place. Johnny Kazum, third, and there's a big battle as they come off the final corner. That is Mohamed El-Kazemi going wide as he duels away with the 76 with the 63 of Alex Bukatsov. Now let's look again. So this is off the start, and we can see just how bunched it was. Look how many cars had to try and fight their way through the gaps. Look at Loggie. He's in about 5th at this point. He just holds the inside line. Thank you, boys. Scrap amongst yourselves. I'll take second place. Great job.
And unfortunately, Sweetnam's just come in as well. So his luck in the first race here for the weekend has not come and transitioned away into race 2, unfortunately, as we go back now to live pictures. There is George King, who's leading, as we said, James Sweetnam into the pit lane. Now, we didn't see actually why Amir Faisalin is being is under investigation, actually. I think I know why, Jake. It's because when they were coming through the final corner, Amir Faisalin was sort of being a little bit cheeky, and he was sort of peering out on the left-hand side, trying to go through already before the lights went out. And I think that's what Amir Faisalin is being pinged for, because he wasn't out of position. However, he was out of line. He should have been tucked in behind, but he was looking for the early jump there.
Of course, you do have to try and stay in your 2 rows of formation. If you break ranks, then essentially you are out of position at the start, even if you haven't overtaken somebody. So that's easily what they will have been looking at. You can still see remnants of that earlier UAE Pro Car crash. There's still a few bits and bobs of shrapnel on the side of the circuit there from that big whack when we saw Eduardo Miranda plough into the barriers with Kevin Day in the UAE Pro Car race earlier. So the Radical drivers need to be careful of that. Look at that. That's how close we got to a big incident. And in fact, there was contact between Mazza and Sweetnam. So I thought they'd avoided it, but in fact they did not. And as a result, Sweetnam has had a problem. And he's actually had to slow the car right down. He's tried to go into the pits from there and then decided to let them all go and then tucked his way back into the pits. So we're back to live pictures, but it looks as though there was a little bit of an argy-bargy moment then between Jacopo Mazza and James Sweetnam, and Sweetnam is out.
Unfortunately, got his first podium in the Golf Radical Cup earlier today, but unfortunately he will not be repeating that success here in race number 2. George King, though, extending his lead by 0.6 of a second now to Ian Loggie, who in turn is 4.2 seconds up the road from Johnny Kazoom. And then we have Alex Bukunchtov, who's a little bit further back from this battle here, because that's Al Hamidi, and he's defending from Faisalin, of course, who is under the watchful eye of the stewards for the time being. But a great battle here for 6th position overall. Faisalin looking each and every way he can past Al Hamidi, but Al Hamidi has proved tough to find a way past. He is a very defensive driver, as Faisalin looks towards the inside, but Al Hamidi shuts the door. And actually, Bukunchtov is actually not that far up the road, because he's just in front of these two that are battling here. Now, Bukunchtov would like them to squabble and play defensive with one another and fall back, so it gives him now a chance to catch Johnny Kazoom, but it looks like it's actually gone the way of Al Hamidi now, who's in close proximity. And actually, that's not Alex Bukunchtov that's in front of him there, or is it? No, it's not. That is the 47 car. That is Al-Kazmi, actually, the number 47 that's just ahead, not Bukunchtov. But now he is in the mix as well. As on the inside, that is Ian Roberts looking for a way past Mazza, and he's got the move stuck, or has his run wide? Not quite, and he has to shut the door there through turn 11, Jake. Well, Mazza's going to come back through. Yeah, very nicely handled by Roberts. He made sure that Mazza couldn't really get the retaliation on the way back out of the apex. So Mazza is now going to try and come around the outside, and there on the inside, that is Zayer Morad getting through on Marcus Bamberg. So a good overtaking point there, and he's managed to hold Marcus Bamberg at bay for the moment. And watch for Faisalin. Faisalin is going to try and get his move done on the inside now. He comes from a long way back on the 76 of Abdunazir Al Hamidi, but Al Hamidi is going to hold on to the position. He goes a little bit deep around the outside line of the apex. You can see that the sun is coming in thick and fast now over Dubai Autodrome, and the sun glare is going to cause its own issues. Where's Ian Loggie gone? Oh, he's tucked right up behind George King. That's why he's putting a lot of pressure on George King. I didn't think Ian Loggie was still in the running, but he's caught George King right up. Now, the thing is, this is going to be an interesting battle for the victory, because although George King has been dominant through the course of the season, he couldn't start race 1 because he had engine problems. That car may not necessarily be up to full speed. He may have to be taking it as cautiously and as carefully as possible. Otherwise, the same problem could come back. And in the Golf Radical Cup, the drivers have to drop at least one round. So the good news is for Ian Loggie is that he can get rid of some points. He could get rid of some of his lower scoring point finishes. But George King, as he's been so dominant, he's scored maximum points in a lot of rounds. He might be losing a lot of points come season end here. So he's trying to keep Ian Loggie at bay. Through Sector 3, it seems to be Ian Loggie really starts to reel in George King, as the gap was 0.4 of a second at the line. That was the closest it's been since the green flag dropped. But it looks through now Sector 1 and Sector 2. Ian Loggie now starts to lose a little bit of ground to George King as we're now into the braking zone of turn 10. Ian Loggie not close enough to make a move. He's going to have to try somewhere, but he does. He's very late on the brakes there through turn 10. That could have all gone pear-shaped for Ian Loggie, but as he now chases George King up the road, oh, loose there, the rear end getting out there through turn 11.
This is about pride for Ian Loggie. He won a race from his point of view in the race one, which was fantastic. But in the back of his mind as a racing driver, he will know, yeah, but George King wasn't on the grid. That could have been a lot harder for me. Now he's got George King in front of him. Engine problems in race one or not, he wants to put one over on George King. He doesn't want to win by default. He doesn't want to win by George King being sat in the pit lane watching. He wants to beat George King in a straight fight. And that will bring the momentum and the motivation and the momentum to him. So he really wants to get George King on his own terms. He doesn't want to be handed anything, as Julien Monet is battling away there with Chosek, I think that is. So Chosek is having a very interesting battle further back in the field with Julien Monet. And as they come down the straight, Ian Loggie's got the slipstream again on George King. He's not quite close enough to slingshot into turn one, but if he keeps George King under pressure and keeps trying to edge him out through each of these apexes, Loggie may just force a mistake from George King, who is not used to being on the back foot.
But I do believe that's going to be a very tough ask there to force a mistake out of George King. He's had faultless races throughout all the race roads so far, even in the shortened version at the Aspirina Circuit, Jake. Remember we had that really late race where George King had a completely different track. Actually, all the drivers had a completely different track configuration to they used to, because we ran the GP circuit and then we ran the West circuit due to some barrier repair that needed to be done. We just couldn't get it in time. George King had to deal with a lot of lap traffic there, and he did not get spooked, nor did he put a foot wrong throughout that race. And Ian Loggie, as Jake said, is trying to force a mistake, but George King, very cool and calm behind the wheel. I think a mistake is not going to come. I think Ian Loggie is going to need something wrong to go wrong with the car and not the driver.
Which has already happened this weekend. So maybe Ian Loggie is just trying to force the engine to go pop for a second time. Kazoum is in third position, doing a great job in front of Alex Bukansov and Mohamed Al-Kazemi. And then we've got Abdulnasir Al-Hamidi. Cars 76 and 11 are given a warning flag for track limits in turn 9 and 12. Now that is Abdulnasir Al-Hamidi, as these two go wheel to wheel again. Robertson Matza, they just about stay off each other. But car number 11, that is Ian Loggie. So Ian Loggie has been given a warning flag, and there's a penalty being given out to Amir Faisalin. 10 seconds penalty, race start infringement. That's what we suspected.
Yeah, that's because he was out of line when before the lights went out, actually, going through turn 16 at the end of the formation lap. Unfortunately, he's been pinged by the race stewards. Now, the gap between King and Loggie has gone up by 0.3 of a second on that lap, as a late lunge almost there from Murad, but thinks better of it on Al-Hamidi. And no, that's not, because that's actually Murad on Faisalin by the looks of it. No, actually, that's Ian Roberts that has got up to Al-Hamidi's back bumper, the 76,
Where?
and he's coming from the outside as well, or the inside, sorry, through the final corner. Ian Roberts is very fast. Now, in previous seasons, he's really come to grips with the radicals here. He had a season last year with the driver coaching of James Edmeades, which actually got him up to speed and faster, and he managed to get podium after podium and even a race win. And we're going to try go 3 wide down towards turn 1. This is not going to work. Someone's going to have to give up. Ian Roberts thinks better of it. A little slight contact there. You could see the 76 slightly unsettled going down towards turn 1, but Ian Roberts backed out at the right time, Jake.
But where has Ian Roberts got that speed from? He was looking a little bit lackluster in race 1, and all of a sudden he's come fighting out of the blocks like a tiger. Brilliant stuff. And his number 7 radical really starting to respond to his inputs now. So Marcus Bamberg, by comparison, is looking a little bit off the pace, as unfortunately is Zaya Murad. They're just trying to keep up with them at this moment in time. But these two still at it. This is the battle for third. This is Kazoum versus Bukansov. So Bukansov is the original pole position sitter. But can Bukansov get one over on Johnny Kazoum? He's going to come from a very long way back. My goodness, Kazoum has to go round the outside to hold the position. They squeeze, they nearly bang wheels. That was millimetre perfect for Johnny Kazoum to hold on from Alex Bukatsov, but now he knows that Bukatsov is going to be going for it. So Johnny Kazoum just about hangs on to third position, but the pole sitter came from a billion miles away to try that move up the inside of the hairpin.
And of course, Ian Roberts last year was the man who finished second overall in the championship and really took the fights to Alex Khatib throughout the entirety of the season. Now, this year he's been floating mid-back. Unfortunately, he wasn't with us at Yas 2 weeks ago, so he's not in the top 3 for the time being, as we're back now with George King. But Ian Roberts putting on a display here, as he always does. Is always very exciting to watch. This is, of course, the battle between Ian Loggie and George King, although it is the other way around, of course, because Ian Loggie is training and he's managed to gain a 10th of a second on this lap. But again, he really starts to reel in George King through that third sector. However, George King seems to just dial it down and get stuck in when it comes to sector 1 and sector 2, because that's where Ian Loggie is losing the most amount of ground to George King. As you see through turn 16, Ian Loggie had a good run, but just wasn't close enough to make a move anywhere past George King here. As we're looking at battles here, that is Bukanshov and Johnny Kazum. So Bukanshov has still not found a way through, still trying to see if he can sniff another step of the podium here, but just can't find through as well. As Ian Roberts is now just 2/10 off of the number 47 of Al-Kazmi. This is a fantastic race again, Jake.
It is. It's almost 2x2 hurrah everywhere, isn't it? You've got King versus Loggie, Kazum versus Bukansov, and Al-Kazemi versus Roberts and Massa. So Massa is still trying to get his move. This battle for 5th position downwards is absolutely rip-roaring stuff. Ian Loggie still trying to put pressure on George King. He goes to the typical racing line. George King's being a little bit more defensive. Loggie will have the faster line off the corner. George King's having to be a little bit more defensive. So Loggie is putting George King under some pressure. See, King doesn't want to break the car. He doesn't want to put himself in the same position that he was in race 1 when he couldn't start because of engine trouble. That was a big mistake from Loggie. He just ran very wide. And up the inside, Mazza, a very late lunge on Al-Kazemi. Has he got through? No, on the exit he drifts out wide and loses the place.
Of course, Abdul Nasser Al-Hamidi's looking at this battle as well because he wants in. He would like to be further up the road as well here at the Dubai Autodrome, and he wants to bring Amir Faislin with him. However, Amir Faislin has that penalty. Marcus Bamberg is trailing. Here is the 777 with his brand new nose cone, and Julien Monet battling at the tail end of the field. Unfortunately, we've not seen James Sweetenham come out, or have we? Because it's showing that he's 5.4 seconds back on our timing screen. However, on our second timing screen, it's saying that the car is still in the pit lane. So unfortunately, James Sweetenham not getting back out. And Ian Loggie's lost heaps of time. He's lost 4/10 of a second on that lap to George King from that slight mistake going through turn 12. But I think, Jake, he just ran too wide.
Yeah, that's definitely cost him a lot of momentum. This battle continues. Al-Kazemi, Mazza, Roberts. As they continue on their way. Or has Roberts broken away? Yeah, Roberts has actually broken away from them. So he's on his own now in 5th position, 7 seconds back from Bukansov, but he's pulled 2 seconds on Al-Kazemi and the rest of the field behind. So Mazza and Al-Hamidi are both trying to get themselves back into a decent position. Ian Loggie is just trying to build up this momentum again. Oh, bit of a moment there for... who was that? Was that Al-Kazemi?
It looked like
just
47.
It did, didn't it? Al-Kazemi just in front of Jacopo Mazza, and he just ran a little bit deep through turn 2. That's definitely going to be flirting with the track limits line.
Certainly would be as well. I wonder if he had to give some time back as well. As long as he didn't get an advantage, I think it should be okay. And as long as he didn't get past the car, or else we'd have a similar situation to what we had in the NGK UE Pro Car Championship earlier today as well. As Ian Loggie still looking for a way past George King.
Mistake from King, and Loggie's going to get up alongside and go for the lead of the battle. That was so close for George King, and now Ian Loggie is going to have a great shot. King is swerving around all over the shop, the back end stepping out. I wonder if the car's starting to struggle again. Loggie's going to get alongside him. King is doing everything he can to hold on to this. Loggie's going to get a faster exit, but he gets forced wide. He's still got momentum. George King is trying to protect. He's trying to protect, and Loggie is throwing everything he can, bar the kitchen sink at him, to try and get the move on the inside. Here he goes, up to the inside, and surely even George King can't hold off Ian Loggie in this form. There he goes. Thank you very much. I'm going to lean on this. George King's going to keep alongside him, and he gets the lead back. Loggie's going to continue around the far side. They give each other space. They're going to get to the braking zone for the final corner again, and Loggie goes deep round the outside. They're still side by side as they come off the final turn, and Loggie's going to take the lead. Brilliant racing.
Incredible stuff as well to get the lead of the race through the outside of turn 16. How Ian Loggie did that, we'll have to ask him on the podium. But George King, that's a very uncharacteristic mistake, and actually almost 2 in a row as well, where we saw the rear end get loose going through turn 12. But Ian Loggie, fantastic moves, and he looks like he's putting a gap now in between himself and George King. Jake, you may be right. There may not be, or better yet, that Golf Radical of George King may still be having some very slight issues as Johnny Kazoom and Alex Kukanstov now battling as well. We've got battles all over the place here because that's the battle, of course, for third overall.
It doesn't matter where you look in this championship. There are drivers going at it hammer and tongs. We've just had Loggie and King going side by side, and now we've got Kazoom and Bukansov doing exactly the same thing for third position. But you have no idea how satisfying it was for Ian Loggie to make that move on George King. He does not want to beat him by default. He wants to beat him on the racetrack in a fair fight. And that was as fair a fight as you can get. Amir Fizulin's just skated off the road at the final corner in front of our position and rejoined. So Amir Fizulin is now down at the back, and I'm afraid he's in last position. But what a satisfying moment that was for Ian Loggie. One of the best sports car battles I have seen for a long, long time between those two. Absolutely fantastic. And now we've got Jacopo Mazza trying to get his move on the 47. Trying to get his move on the inside. Very tight battles between them. Mohamed El Kazemi just about hanging on. And here comes Abdulnazir Al Hamidi as well, but George King just can't quite hold a candle to Ian Loggie after that move. Here's Abdulnazir Al Hamidi on the inside of Mazza, and that'll do. Jacopo Mazza has no response, but he runs wide on the exit. That could change around. Now let's have a look. This is what happened between Ian Loggie and George King. Absolutely amazing. Look, side by side as they come through. And my goodness me, there's inches between them. Loggie commits round the outside. George King is desperately trying to hold the inside line. There is nothing between them as they come through. They are on the lock stops, round the final corner at Dubai Autodrome. It's impossible to go wheel to wheel through there. And Loggie holds it round the outside, sweeps across. King's back end steps out. Loggie says, thanks mate, I'm off.
And you could see that George King's car on the right-hand side was unsettled. It was moving a lot around that right-hand side. But how Ian Loggie went fast around the outside of turn 16 and didn't lose. His car is absolutely amazing. But I guess British GT does that for you, right? A number of years racing British GT, wins all over the UK. You got to know each and every part of the car that will basically lose out. And Ian Loggie, with all that experience, managed to keep the car at bay. And we've got yellow flags.
Yellow flags. Now, is that a car off the road or is it a safety car? I think it's just a car off the road. I don't think we're under safety car conditions. So there are yellow flags up at that corner as George King continues to put pressure on Ian Loggie. It doesn't look like there's a safety car being called. Oh, that's why. I think that's Amir Fizulin, isn't it? Is that Fizulin?
That is the number 15, and he was one of our drivers that had engine problems in qualifying as well.
Yeah,
all not as well with Amir Faiz's car.
Looks like it's come back.
He did manage to do at least the full race in the earlier today at the Golf Radical Cup, but unfortunately the car seems to have just stopped, and unfortunately Amir Fazlin is out of this race. I guess the good news is for him that he won't get that 10-second penalty because it won't penalise him that much when you're out of the race. But unfortunately, he is out, so the gremlins may not all be sorted out. The team will need to figure out what's wrong with that to get him up and running for the endurance race we have tomorrow.
I don't mind telling you that after the races at Yas Marina a couple of weeks ago when the Golf Radical Cups were here, I couldn't help but overhear somebody saying, and George King wins again. There was almost like a kind of acceptance that every time they go racing, George King is going to win. So retiring from that race earlier was a surprise. The amount of satisfaction that Ian Loggie is going to have if he can hold on to this in front of George King is unquantifiable, because the amount of drivers in this field who want to take on George King at his best, at his peak, and try and beat him. And Ian Loggie will have the recognition of being the man to do so if he can hang on in front of George King. George hasn't given up yet. He's still trying to keep in touch with Ian Loggie just in case something goes awry with the Scottish driver in front of him. But I've been such a supporter of Ian Loggie for a many number of years. He goes back a long, long way in his racing. He joined as an amateur. He was a businessman. He decided to go. And that's a stop. That's a stoppage out on the track. That is Julien Monet. So the problems that he still had have come back by the look of it. So Julien Monet, unfortunately, will not finish the race either, and joins Amir Fazlin and James Sweetnam on the sidelines. Hopefully that doesn't result in a safety car, but that is right off the racing line, so we might be all right with that. But it's a possibility. It is a possibility. We'll have to keep an eye on it. But certainly for Ian Loggie, out in the lead of this race, He's come a long, long way. He was a businessman, an enthusiast of cars and racing, decided to have a go. He went and played in the Porsche Drivers Association Championship in Great Britain about 11 years ago. That's when I first came across him. He then ended up racing in Brit Car in sports car racing as he climbed up through the ranks, did a bit of GT Cup, went and did British GT, and here he is having fun in the off-season in the Golf Radical Cup. He loves this sport, he loves this category, and he particularly loves racing out here in the United Arab Emirates, and he is having a wonderful time, and I can't begin to describe just how big the smile is going to be on Ian Loggie's face as he's driving around from ear to ear, knowing that I'm ahead of the championship leader and I'm absolutely smashing it.
And Julian Monet appears to be stopped through turn 12 by the looks of it. He looks like he's just off of the runoff area after the exit, and that's of course the run down towards the bowl complex, which takes away an overtaking opportunity for the time being for George King, and that corner is key because it is a very tight right-hander there. And unfortunately for George King, he's going to have to try somewhere else around the track. Now, George King is falling back. However, he's not losing significant ground to Ian Loggie. He's only losing about 1/10 of a second or so every other lap. And that's just gone up now again because the gap is 1.1 seconds. So actually, he's lost just over 1/10 of a second on that lap, Jake, as the gap has gone up to 1.1 seconds. But it seems to be George King's car is up to par at the moment, but it looks like he might be nursing it back as unfortunately he's losing ground. It's very uncommon to see him fall back like this.
Absolutely. I mean, we watched him a couple of weeks ago at Yas Marina, and we saw just the incredible strength and magnanimity, and he was just dominating, disappearing out in front. Nobody could hold a candle to him, and it does look like a little bit of a conservative, a lean effort from him so far. I think he's just trying to bank points because he knows that a second place finish is better than being parked on the sidelines again. So from his point of view, he just wants to bring home some points. The car is not quite right, but he still had to try and fend off from Ian Loggie. He still had to try and defend the position. You've got to when you're racing because you never know what's going to happen to your opponent out in front. There is a minute to go, and based on the lap times, they might just be on the last lap. It's a bit touch and go. They might be on the last lap. They might have one more lap to go. So we'll have to keep an eye on it in terms of the times because they won't get an additional lap when the time runs out. When the time goes down to 0, it will just be the end of the race. They've got about 40 seconds until Ian Loggie will know his fate. The thing is, he can't afford to slow up because George King is still only a second behind him. So if he gets another lap, he gets another lap. He can't really just cruise around the line. I think we are going to see the checkered flag this time, though.
I think we might have just enough time. I think they'll come over with like just fractions of a second when they come across the line because the races are working their way towards the bowl complex, and there's only 2 corners between there and the start-finish line. Now, we can't quite see if the last lap board is out, but this time round, if we get a shot, the lead is working their way across the line.
And Mazda went for a move. There was a stationary yellow and Mazda went for a move because that car is still parked up. But the checkered flag is surely going to come out as the time runs down to 0. The checkered flag flies and Ian Loggie wins again. He beats George King in a straight fight, and I guarantee you that win is going to mean more to him than his win earlier did.
And your maths is spot on, Jake, as it always is there, because you got it right down to the final few seconds there.
It was about a second and a half until the line.
But unfortunately on that last lap there, George King lost 9/10 of a second to Ian Loggie, so I think he knew as well that he can't fight this anymore, and there is maybe some minor issues with that number 14, but a great drive nonetheless. And it looks like Alex Buchanstov will be on the third step of the podium because he found a way past Johnny Kazoum and put a gap of 7/10 of a second between himself and Johnny. Ian Roberts across the line in 5th position. Matza is in 6th, and Al-Kazimi is in 7th, with Al-Hamidi across the line in 8th. Marcus Bamberg is 9th, and rounding out the top 10 is Zahir Murad. Jake, I will leave you. Well, it's time for some podium presentations. That was a fantastic race, though, Jake. I can't wait for the endurance tomorrow.
Yeah, it's going to be great stuff. Thank you, Chris Milbourne. Great to have your company once again. Jacopo Mazza did have a last lap battle there with Mohamed Al-Kazemi, but I saw them both cross the line, so I assume they just about managed to stay out of trouble, although it was right close at one stage. Ian Loggie and George King in 1st and 2nd from Alex Buchanstov and Johnny Kazoum. Then Ian Roberts, Jacopo Mazza and Mohamed Al-Kazemi. Abdulnazir Al-Hamidi in 8th place in front of Marcus Bamberg and the Pakistani driver Zahir Murad. And then Ray Yuang from Damian Chosek, and the retirements Julien Moni, Amir Fezilin and James Sweetnam on the very first lap of racing. Well, it really was sensational racing there from the Golf Radical Cup. Once again, let's take a look back over the best bits of a stellar second race. So it was a bit flotsam and jetsam on the way down to the first corner. George King had the momentum and certainly had the line into turn one. But watch Ian Loggie, he's in about 5th position at this point. Ready to the inside. Patience, patience, squirt of the throttle. That'll do. 2nd place. Absolutely brilliant from Ian Loggie. Everyone else just trying to avoid each other. Jacopo Mazza very nearly tangling with Ian Roberts as they went through turn 2. But everybody, despite the close nature of the start, managed to stay out of dodge. That was absolutely terrific and great reactions. Brilliant racecraft from all of the drivers. That could have ended very messily indeed, and it didn't. Now, there was that little bit of a moment between Jacopo Mazza and James Sweetenham on the opening lap. That was enough to put Sweetenham out of the race. It was a harder than first thought whack. Ian Roberts battling beautifully with Jacopo Mazza, really putting on an excellent overtaking move in the mid part of the race. But this was the battle that held everyone's breath. George King versus Ian Loggie. And for nearly half a lap, they ran side by side as Ian Loggie tried every trick in the book to get past George King. He hustled him, he really intimidated him. And when the opportunity came to race wheel to wheel, he was not going to back down from the challenge. There were some great midfield battles, but here it is, the battle between Johnny Kazoum and Alex Buchensoff, and they very nearly traded paint on that occasion. But this was the battle. The mistake came from George King, and Ian Loggie was all over him like whitewash, and they ran side by side. What a move in the final corner. Ian Loggie stood on everything, held his nerve, and took the lead, and did not look back. Great racing from Ian Loggie. That is one he'll replay for a long time. Amir Fezulin sadly unable to finish the race, nor was Julien Monet. And despite pulling off the circuit on the runoff area, we didn't need to go to a safety car period, which is very good news indeed. We were able to race under green flag conditions throughout. And what a satisfying victory it is then for Ian Loggie. The man who has not been beaten all year is finally vanquished by Ian Loggie in brilliant style. Well, an absolutely terrific performance from Ian Loggie as he takes the victory in front of George King and Alex Buchensoff. For those who want more action from the Golf Radical Cup, no problem, you shall have it. Tomorrow we will have an endurance race where myself and Chris Milbourne will talk you through the action as the final race of the weekend plays out. There's still some great action to come from the Dubai Autodrome as we have more racing from the UAE Pro Cars, but of course we also have the first race of the weekend for the Formula Regional Asian Championship. Enjoy!